Hey, we're back. This is John.
Hey, it's Paul.
And it's Eric.
And it's What If Geeks. And we are here with our first character spotlight. Right? It's the first one?
I think it's the first one.
Not our first one ever.
Not our first one ever? Oh, well, you guys have done them before I ever arrived, I think, with Batman and maybe some other stuff.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, there you go. It'll be our first character spotlight for 2021. It's going to be, I guess, a semi-regular series as we see fit for different characters within movies or whatever kind of pop culture shit that we decide bears looking into. Like, for example, we're going to do this one on Scarlet Witch because we're knee-deep in WandaVision. So we figured this is a good time as any to do it. And for some of these, we're just going to do some background on the character, what they're up to now in either comics or movies or whatever. And like for example, for this one, since she has a current show out, we're going to do kind of similarities and differences between the comic version and what we see in the MCU. So we'll kick it off with Wanda, Scarlet Witch. Eric,
yeah, I feel like we need some intro music or something.
I know, right?
Character spotlight.
Oh shit! That's it. I told you, we're gonna be full blown radio show by the time.
All right, so Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, originally created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, first introduced in X-Men #4 way back in March 1964, long before I was born or reading comics. She made her first appearance in the MCU in Captain America Winter Soldier, which was back in 2014. She is portrayed by Elizabeth Olsen on screen. Aliases in the MCU, she really doesn't have any. I mean, Scarlet Witch and Wanda, I think, is really it. But in the comics, she had more, particularly Wanda Frank, which will go to something else we'll talk about later. But her backstory has changed in the comic a few times, or been muddled a few times at least, we'll say. Not so much in the MCU because they've left some things open and they've just totally ignored others. So interesting talking point, but her powers and abilities. So, her powers and abilities, she's like the most OP Avenger I think there is. Would you agree with that? I mean, she can do damn near anything in the comic at some point, maybe not all at once, but
yeah. And they make a comment about her in the MCU too, which I guess would kind of sum up what she is in the comics as well. But when they first talk about her and Pietro in Age of Ultron, they're like, he's got Ultron's got two superpowers with him, and they're like, he's fast and she's weird. Which pretty much sums up her powers really well.
I think that was probably a reference to the, what the hell was it called? The Cap's Kooky. Oh, fuck, I don't remember what the hell it was. What was it?
Cap's Kooky Quartet.
Yeah, Cap's Kooky Quartet, yeah. But yeah, so I think because her powers are so broad, it's hard to say that there's really differences between what we see in the comics and what we see on screen. I mean, she can basically manipulate reality, which includes any sort of matter or energy or anything like that. She can change reality. That happens in both. In the comics, she actually alters time. I don't know that she's exactly done that yet here, but then you could look at WandaVision and say we're going through decades. So
well, she also does rewind shit a little bit here and there.
Yeah, and she does the rewinding there. That's right. So maybe that too. Telekinesis, they've shown in both. Teleportation, I get. Has she teleported in the MCU? Yeah, I think she has. Maybe.
No, not unaided.
Not unaided. Okay. Yeah.
Not a Nightcrawler and then reappear over here.
Yeah. Telepathy, reading people's minds. We've seen a bit of that, and then not exactly flight in the MCU, but she's used her powers to sort of like shoot herself up in the air and then make a soft landing. So more or less, right? So the powers are kind of the same, but the origin of those powers is like wildly different between the two, right? Because in the comic side of it, she is the what do they call them? The Homo superior or whatever. I mean, she's got the X gene. She's like not quite human to start with. Right. And then on top of that, she gets powers from Thawne. She gets her chaos magic or whatever from this elder god. And then she gets trained by Agatha Harkness, who's like an ancient being that's apparently been around for like 10,000 years. And then later in the comics from Doctor Strange, right? So she has like a whole peppering of different sources of her power and abilities. In the MCU, we don't even know if she's a mutant. Is she?
Right. And we've already discussed that a little bit in our reviews of this series alone. Because in the MCU, at the end of Captain America Winter Soldier, you get Baron Strucker in his fortress discussing creating superpower beings with a scientist or whatever. And they said, like, everybody's died. And he says, well, except for the twins. And then he says, welcome to the age of miracles. And you see Wanda and Pietro in the cell or in two different cells, rooms or whatever, observation rooms, and he's kind of bouncing up the walls really fast, and she's making blocks float, with her telekinesis. So again, it was one of those that was back when Fox owned the rights to mutants.
Right, there weren't.
So there was a whole thing that they couldn't say mutants there. Now we fast forward to now, Disney owns Fox, and we know they're going to bring the X-Men into MCU somehow, and our theory is that somehow, some way, WandaVision is at least going to play a small part in that. My theory was that the Infinity Stone that they used, because they said it unlocked a power in them, they kind of retconned that. It didn't give them their powers, it unlocked something in them. So whether or not all mutants were just locked, like their powers were locked away, or if it kickstarted something within the universe, who the hell knows? We'll figure that out as we go. Right. But yeah, I think you're definitely going to. If I was a betting man, I would bet a good amount of money you're going to find out. Maybe not by the end of this series, but by the time you get to like Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, you're going to find out she's a mutant.
Yeah. So I mean, we can keep pulling on that thread because the mutant piece is missing right now, but we don't know for sure where it's headed. Definitely could be a mutant. The chaos magic, the whole powers from a god thing, missing right now. But then we have we should mention before we go into this, this will include spoilers for WandaVision up to episode 3. So if you haven't watched it, we're going to mention things that have happened in episodes 1, 2, or 3 of that show. So be careful, be warned. So we think there is a Agatha Harkness maybe likeness in WandaVision now. So maybe that's going to explain some of this magic, witchcraft kind of thing that they really haven't elaborated on in MCU.
Yeah. I think there's ties to Mephisto.
Possibly, yes. And then they could change the whole thing and say she got her powers from a completely different sort of pseudo deity, right?
Right. Yeah. Because in the comics, Mephisto is their version of the devil, which would go through that chaos, dark magic thing. Maybe it could be a good tie-in there. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and then the training part of it. So we haven't seen her with Agatha yet. That could happen. But then Doctor Strange, who will later become her mentor in the comics, I guess, we have an opportunity for that to happen real soon. And it seems like we're leading into that. I think all the indicators are this ties right into multiverse madness, right? So all these things could come to fruition, but they haven't yet, at least. They've kind of left it very open and largely unexplained. And what MCU has decided to focus on, in fact, she's not the only character, but that power just comes from the Infinity Stone, and there's really nothing else given. And she's not the only character where they did that. It's like, oh, powers came from the Infinity Stone. That's it.
Yeah, because right now with this version of Wanda and episode 3 of WandaVision being in the bag, trying to figure out what the fuck's going on with everything, I literally feel like as we discuss things and try to guess what's going on, I feel like the Hulk during Endgame where he's like, time travel.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, sure. And if I'm right, I'm right. That's exactly how I feel right now.
Yeah. Anything else about her powers you want to talk about? I mean, I think the next thing...
No, the reality thing will come into play a lot more in this discussion because there's a lot of that. Like,
the reality bending, yeah. So I guess starting at the beginning, in the comics, she is I guess we should say that there are multiple different origin stories. Some have been sort of retconned. Some have been like, oh, that was not real. We thought that was what it was or whatever. It's kind of like,
so when you first see her, she's part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants.
Very common,
right?
Yeah. So, I mean, so at one point she was the daughter of Magna and Magneto, who was called, what the hell was his name? Something Magnuson, or he had another name.
Eric Magnus Lencher.
So she was the daughter of them. The mother saw Magneto, murder like a group of villagers or something. And she was like, oh my God, can't have the kids with him. Got to run away. And she goes to Transia, I think, has the twins there. I think she's afraid that Magneto is going to find them and ends up killing herself, basically. I mean, she goes outside and exposes herself. And yeah. And then so somebody else sort of takes charge of them and ends up putting them. Well, first, see, this is where it gets all messy, because first Miss America is pregnant, loses the kids, and they try to pretend like that's hers, and they tell Whizzer that his wife died and those are his kids, and then he runs away, and so then they have to give her to an adoptive family, which becomes the Maximoffs, which is where she gets her last name from. But in part of the comics, they call her by the last name Frank, which was the alter ego of the other guy. So it's a damn mess, to be honest.
Well,
were you going to say something?
Well, yeah, because there's even a part where she's got something to do, or the two of them have something to do with the High Evolutionary, and they're up on like Wundagore Mountain with Bova, the talking cow, which is actually referenced in this show.
Yeah,
you see Bova milk at some point in the show.
Oh, I did not see that.
Yep. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, Bova's the one that takes charge right after Magda's gone and tries to find the twins at home or whatever. I think that's also where she gets the chaos magic powers somehow from Thawne. It happens there.
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I'm doing a terrible job because I only wrote down half sentences from what I remember. But
our character spotlights off to a fucking resounding start. They're all not going to be this confusing.
Yeah, but so, well, you know what? This comics, though, the comic series has existed for, I mean, it's like you had it started in the 60s, okay? Then there's a big line in the 80s, which is House of M and all the other stuff we've talked about. And then it jumps way ahead to Young Avengers in 2007, 6, something like that. And you have a whole nother storyline where it all gets kind of, I don't want to say retconned. It's not retconned, but what you thought was right before has now been changed a bit.
Yeah, because they always got to do that. Because every time you get a new series of writers in for different comics, and Marvel and DC are examples of this time and time again, something's getting retconned. So you get different things with these, especially with these two characters. Because then if you go into like the ultimate storyline, that's something we're not even gonna, that's a can of worms not even going to open up, because like they're incestuous in that. So it's like,
oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I think we have a picture of that on one of the episodes we did on video.
yeah, we do.
And the longer characters have been around, the more that happens. And as John just said, like you get a new set of writers or editors or something, and they're like, I don't like that what you did last time, so I need to change it.
Yeah. I mean, essentially what you have is it's her story being rewritten roughly every 20 years.
Yeah,
at least to some extent, right? So yes, this might be confusing, but it's really not our fault.
Yeah, exactly. We picked one of the most confusing characters in comics to start this series off. So,
so I mean,
I can only go up from here.
Yeah, talking about early life, though, I mean, like some things are dead on the same. So she's a fraternal twin with Pietro. No change there. They did that in the MCU. He is Quicksilver. I don't think they changed anything from that relationship, really. And he does die in the comics, and that is a major effect. That affects her dramatically in both, I guess. But it just who kills him is the big difference. So Magneto kills him in the comics, and Scarlet Witch is actually able to resurrect him later when she's more powerful, I think, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah.
Which could happen here.
Yeah, and again, comic characters come and go. There's no
Stays dead.
death ever.
Yeah.
No dead.
And so in the MCU, he's killed by Ultron, which they just mentioned in the episode 3 of WandaVision. But I mean, we all saw it on screen, I suppose. So that part's not really different either. But sort of where they start and how they get into this. So there's a whole conversion from sort of bad guy to hero. It's not like they're anti-heroes. Okay, that's not really how they are, but they are both sort of bad guys at the beginning and then become good guys, right? Her and her brother. And so the way they do it is wildly different in the comics versus the MCU. So in the comics, they get sort of, they owe Magneto a debt who is potentially their father, maybe not. I don't know.
You don't find that out right away either. It's
no, you don't. Yeah. And then he essentially, I mean, what you learn is that he sort of blackmailed them into being part of the Brotherhood of Mutants or Evil Mutants, whichever one you want to call them. And it comes to a point though where Magneto and who the hell's the other one? Somebody else gets abducted by the Stranger. The Brotherhood is kind of disbanded or reestablished differently. And Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are both like, you know what? We already paid our debt back to Magneto. We're done with this. And then they just sort of flip. Now in the MCU, it's done quite a bit different. So they get their house blown up, which I guess we should go back to this point too. They may have definitely in the MCU, their last name is Maximoff. There's no question about that. And that's the adoptive family name in comics. But what we don't know is if they were actually adopted in the MCU or if that's their original family. I mean, they never really tell you. What you know is place gets bombed, basically. House is crumbling. The parents are dead. And I mean, before you know it, they think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, because they hate Stark because they saw his dad go up there to town.
So they think they're doing the right thing. They end up joining up with Ultron, and at some point they realize, oh, fuck, this is a bad guy. He just wants to destroy the world. And then they flip. So it's definitely a much different way that they sort of made that engagement. But the end result, again, is the same. That they, well, not they, but she ends up in the Avengers, right? I mean, I guess Quicksilver does too, maybe for a couple of minutes or something. Yeah. Unofficially. But I mean, so it all kind of works out, but skipping a lot of steps, right? There's no X-Men involvement here. Back
to the whole Disney Fox thing. There's a concrete reason for that then.
Mm-hmm.
So,
again, hopefully
confusion.
Yeah, well, and hopefully, I mean, I don't feel like Feige is ever going to retcon anything he's done in the MCU, really. Maybe old movies before he arrived there, they would do that with, but I feel like the storyline he's created now, they're not going to bother. So things that they didn't bother to explain, they can certainly re-explain in any way they want, like who were their parents? How did they die? Where did they come from? Was that really their parents, right? They could redo all that stuff and it wouldn't make a big difference, but I think on that note too, the location, if I remember right, I know it's Sokovia in the MCU, but wasn't there a different name in the comics? Transia or some shit like that?
Something like that, yeah.
It was some Serbian country.
Yeah.
A little different, kind of the same. I mean, they even play off certain elements. Like I remember her, she was singing, she sings a lullaby to the babies in the comics, and then she does it in WandaVision episode 3. And it's in some random language that you can't understand, but it sounds sort of Serbian. So in the comics too, in the comics too, she was part of Hydra. So I guess that also sort of in a very indirect way has been addressed, but there's a lot of open there that you could mess with, and they could mess with when they write this story out moving forward.
Yep.
What else can we talk about? Relationships, I guess. Aside from just the parents and the brother. Of course, Vision is her lover in the comics. That holds true in the MCU.
Yep. Now I mentioned in our last review, in the comics there is a point there where she's in love with Wonder Man, Simon. I forget what his name is. But Wonder Man, he's another Avenger, right? These ionic powers or whatever he's got, right? He dies. So, I mean, don't fall in love with this chick because you're going to be dead. Don't get close to her. So he dies, and Hank Pym creates Vision, I think. Yeah. So Hank Pym creates Vision, but he models Vision's brainwave patterns off of Wonder Man, which inadvertently causes her to fall in love with him in the comics because it's the same personality type kind of thing. Ish, I guess. I don't know, because comics. So she's in love with Vision there. Yeah, right. And same thing here. She falls in love with him because he saves her at the end of Age of Ultron. And there's a quick little thing where he saves her from the bus that's about to fall or whatever. He flies her away. You can see her look at him.
Yeah.
And, okay. And then by the time you get to Civil War, they've got a relationship going. And then Thanos ripped his fucking head out.
And then all of a sudden they're married and having babies.
Yeah. Time travel. No. Yeah.
So I guess before we get into any of the real storyline stuff, which I know you'll have a lot to say about, John, having babies is probably the next logical thing to talk about, because in episode
we touch on the Agatha Harkness and Doctor Strange thing, because they're going to come up.
Yeah, that's true. So so up to this, prior to WandaVision, there was no indication that there was any involvement between them really at all for any reason. The story wasn't headed that way. I don't feel like, although there was some talk, like Hollywood talk of, this may happen and, this will be tied to Doctor Strange movie and that kind of stuff, right? But we didn't have anything. But then in WandaVision, they've really kind of, I think, laid that out. We've got a Agatha Harkness pseudonym there. It seems like definitely some involvement. There's definitely a reality bending multiverse element to everything that's going on right now. I think they're working their way to that natural tie-in with Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. So the question is, how will that work? Because Agatha Harkness was her real first mentor and taught her to use all her powers. Maybe not all of her powers, but taught her to hone her powers. And at this point in the MCU, I feel like she's incredibly powerful already, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, Cap and Thor and whoever, they all tried to take down Thanos and failed. And then she walked up there with one fucking hand in her magic, like, I got this, fuck this guy. Yeah. Like they've already made it out. Like she's totally OP already at this point. So how did she get there? And what do you do moving forward?
Right. Which again goes to my point of whether or not Agatha Harkness or Agnes, who we believe is Agatha, is working for Mephisto, or she's there to try to help Wanda, or
and maybe that's the way they play it out. Maybe Agatha, whatever, isn't some super powerful ancient witch being that's going to help her hone in her powers, but rather somebody that's going to get her through this sort of moment of madness that she's living and talk her out of it, and she'll be her mentor that way. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And then she could go on to have Doctor Strange teach her about time manipulation, which we haven't seen yet, and we absolutely know he knows tons about, right? So,
sure. And we know definitely she's in Multiverse of Madness. Everyone on the internet is leaning toward her being the pseudo villain for that. Maybe not quite, a reluctant villain or a out of control.
Out of control would make sense, yeah.
Where she can't help herself, but so he's got to do something to take her down. All right, cool.
So where the hell were we? We were talking about Agatha and Doctor Strange mentorship. Oh, I was about to talk about twins.
Okay.
So, and I think this will be a part where you can talk a whole bunch, John, because I'm sure you remember it all, and my memory isn't that great. But
let's talk twinsies.
So in the comic, I think she does have twins, and it's those twins are first regular babies, and they have to do with Mephisto, and we'll get to that. But they eventually disappear. And there's a whole sort of storyline that goes on in, I think it's Avengers Disassembled.
Yes.
But
something is attacking the Avengers and nobody knows what. And then
what it ultimately comes down to, though, is that I think Wasp is having an affair with one of the other Avengers. And she's having a conversation with Wanda about it, and she says something about a pregnancy scare, and then mentions Wanda's kids, like sort of in passing on accident, whatever. And then all of a sudden Wanda like has a break and she starts changing reality. And this all leads into the House of M storyline, but Wanda ends up killing Vision. One of the times disassembling him. Maybe killing him is not the right word, but I'm trying to remember. There's more than that happens in that storyline. She kills. She ends up killing Hawkeye, and then she somehow recreates her children, reincarnate. I don't know what the hell it is, but yeah, you tell this one actually because I don't remember the.
Well, we might as well just go back to the Mephisto thing, because the first time when she has these kids, is it a full-blown pregnancy? I think I forget in the comics, but she has twins in the comics at one point, and it turns out that she created them using, I don't know if it's on purpose or not, but using pieces of Mephisto's soul. So he comes back to collect the pieces of his soul and takes her kids.
Yeah, and they just vanish. It's not like they die. They just disappear from existence.
So that's what kind of causes her to start going down this rabbit hole of madness, which I guess will eventually lead into, again, comics being what they are. There's so many different storylines that crisscross here. But you get into the Avengers Disassembled thing, where it turns out that it's her starting to manipulate shit.
Yeah.
And they try to go stop her, and she creates the House of M world. Basically what she does is she gives everybody what they want using her reality powers. So, like, Magneto is basically, he's royalty. You know, everybody looks up to him. They're the first family of this entire world. Spider-Man is like a celebrity, and he's married to Gwen Stacy and has a kid. All this shit, right? All these things happen in this thing. So she's got her kids there, and they're referred to as William and Thomas in the comics. The heroes, I think it starts with Wolverine because of his healing factor, realizes that something's wrong, and they wind up going after her to try to reset reality back to what it was. That's when she does the No More Mutants line.
Yeah.
She does that, and she reduces the number of mutants down to 198. But we are back in our
give or take, because I feel like there's a comic book specifically where there's like 199th mutant or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they open the idea that there may have been a bunch of others that they weren't actually tracking that people didn't know about.
Yes, because back to writers didn't like what other writers did. You got rid of so-and-so, and I wanted to use him in the story when I took over, whatever. So we had 198 mutants. That number subjects change later.
Yeah.
198 asterisk.
Yeah, asterisk. There you go.
198-ish.
Yeah.
So from there, we kind of, I think she disappears completely for a while. Right? Like she's gone. Like they can't find her because she got rid of the mutants and she just disappeared. After that, you get into the formation of the young Avengers, and it's just a bunch of kids with abilities that are emulating like original Avengers or old school Avengers. And you got like kid who's kind of like Captain America. You got Hulkling, and then you got two kids that show up.
Yeah.
Billy and Tommy, and one is Wiccan, and he's got like
basically Wanda's powers.
And the other one is Speed, and
he's Quicksilver.
Yeah, and he looks like Quicksilver right down to the white hair, right? But they don't. You had their names in the other write up. Tommy.
It's Tommy Shepard and Billy. I can't remember his name. It came to me when we were talking about it earlier.
Yeah. So, anyway, two different kids, right? But then again, as you're going further along the Young Avengers storyline, the plot thickens and you find out that, oh, these are Wanda's twins reincarnated or something. Their spirit took over these kids or whatever the hell happened. But it's Wanda's kids, right? And I think that's kind of where I fell off, like, trying to keep up with every comic book in existence, so because of deployments and shit. So,
I mean, that whole storyline, like that you just described, I mean, that literally spanned 20 years of time. I mean, with gaps in the middle, but
yeah,
it was long. I mean, House of M was in the 80s, and then the Young Avengers were.
I think House of M was in the 90s.
It was 90s.
I think so, but I mean.
Well, in any case, then the Young Avengers thing was like 2000, so it was like a long ways away that they sort of tied all this together. But
yeah, regardless, it was over 20 years worth of shit that they were like. So now we're cramming all that into the MCU, So basically, not to keep the point dragging on. She had twins. She went nuts, and ruined reality for a bunch of people.
And now she has twins
going nuts. Yeah, now we're in the MCU, we're doing it again.
Yeah, so, the motivators might be different. It seems like in WandaVision that Vision is the reason that she's gone into this fake reality, whereas...
It's definitely started with her brother.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you could argue that for sure, yeah.
Because those things didn't happen too far. I mean, you're talking about maybe a year total in MCU time. I think,
but she also in Civil War, she's the reason that the government sort of starts clamping down on the Avengers, right? So she's dealing with that stuff too. Like she internalizes all that stuff because it's her fault.
Yes, and they basically want to talk about her, and Cap is like she's a kid, and that's what turns him against the government, and you start Civil War, because they're trying to protect her.
Right.
So, which in turn, she blames herself more and more for because now everybody's fighting because of her. So, there's a lot of shit that happens in the MCU rather quickly to kind of break her.
Yeah, it's definitely a build-up, but I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong because they really haven't said it outright, but I feel like in the comic, the twins were really the precipice for her to change reality, the loss of the twins, rather. And then I feel like in the MCU, they made Vision the precipice of that.
When she flips out on Thanos and she says, "You took everything from me."
Right.
Yeah. And he replies with the greatest line ever, which is, "I don't even know who you are." But Vision was all she had, right? After Pietro's gone and all of that her family, right, off screen, and she says, "You taken everything." So
it was Vision. So now we're in WandaVision, and we're looking at what she probably 99.9% created this area where she's got a nice little life with Vision, and we discussed it where my theory was that the only quote-unquote happy life that she's got to draw upon are like some old sitcoms she was watching when Eric was hanging out at his grandfather's house. And and so she's drawing on I Love Lucy and the Brady Bunch and all this other shit to create these little happy moments in her life and have a life with Vision. And that's where we are here now.
Which is apparently all happening in a matter of days too, right? Because Paul Bettany's character keeps bringing that up. It's only been like, wasn't it yesterday? It's like,
yeah. He literally tells her like 12 hours ago, you just found out you were pregnant. Now you're getting ready to give birth.
Yeah.
There's something's wrong, and then
So,
she goes time.
Yeah, they're traveling through decades, but it seems like all of this is happening in the span of a few days so far.
Yeah, which I think is definitely a nod to what I said, or confirmation of what I said about her just creating this reality out of various shows that she remembers. Yeah, and like you said, she's kind of filling more of it in. So it's going through like the shows she watched back in Sokovia or wherever. It's just kind of like progressing to a point.
How long? So I saw something on the internet about leaving Tony Stark's funeral. She's not flipped out, right? Like she seemed okay.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's no incidents. So this could all be sort of post Tony Stark funeral, or are they going to say this takes place somewhere between like the snap, Tony's second snap, losing Tony 2, and the funeral, or are we sort of post funeral?
No, I bet this is post funeral. Like she's had time to sit and contemplate.
Yeah, I mean, you could bring up a lot of excuses here, like the snapback. Almost all the heroes are back, but not Vision because he died before.
Right.
It could be something like that, or it's what's that?
Not Pietro.
Yeah, not Pietro. He died before. Yeah, so it could be could be sort of a thing where she's looking around and it takes a little time, but she sees that everybody else sort of has their loved ones back in their lives. Things are sort of pseudo returning to normal, and for her, it's still all missing.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to see in the next couple episodes.
I think so too. So we hit a point here where we can't talk about likenesses and differences anymore because the MCU hasn't happened yet. But we are missing a bunch of things that they could introduce in the wrong order, right? Sure. So she has a ton of interaction with Professor X in the comics and the X-Men in general. We're missing virtually all of that at this point. Right. And it's a perfect time to introduce it, given real world acquisitions and contracts, and it's a perfect time to make all that happen. But you have to do it in a really awkward way, where the major storylines that created this, Avengers versus X-Men, House of M, they all can't happen because they've already sort of borrowed from these things already for previous MCU stories, right?
Yeah. So it's definitely going to be its own thing. But like I said before, I think this is going to lead into the introduction of mutants and X-Men and all that other shit into the MCU. This is the launching point, one way or another.
One way or another, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it is.
It is. I think it'll be good. So any other storyline stuff you want to talk? Oh, you know what we didn't talk about? There's also something else that hasn't really been addressed that they could do now, which is the Uncanny Avengers. Right, that's the hybrid X-Men Avengers mashup, which could lead to a whole nother phase or two of MCU movies if they wanted it to.
Sure,
right, yeah, and we could bring in your Wonder Man at that point, and I'm not even sure what else. Apocalypse Twins. I don't know. There's so many things. And then I guess we've got a hint of it in WandaVision now, but Shield is one sort of element in the comics that deals with what do we call them? Terrestrial threats or threats on Earth, and then Sword is the other side, right? And we have a whole nother series of superheroes dealing more with oh God, why am I mind blanking that? A movie that should have come out in November and didn't.
Black Widow?
No. Space, different universes.
Eternals?
Yeah, thanks. Eternals, right?
Eternals.
So you got this whole other storyline too that were tied in the comics and could be tied in a whole bunch of different ways now, depending on how they want to mess with things. So
it'd be kind of awesome. I just thought of it, but I can't be the only person who's ever thought of this. But is that in the next couple episodes, no one can get through to Wanda. And then a guy in a wheelchair pulls up outside at the SHIELD base, and he goes, maybe I can help. And they're like, who are you? And he hands him a card that says Charles Xavier.
Right.
And that'd be
Ooh, it's almost an after credits thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After the 8th episode, credits have rolled.
and they're like, and he has powers. Like, well, how come we've never heard of you? And he's like, wow.
Yeah, or we can do something like that, or if you don't want to do like a reveal, because then I almost feel like if you do something like that and you don't show either like James McAvoy or somebody in that role, show their face, then maybe you do something like you save that for whatever movie or whatever they're going to do, but do like they managed to free her from whatever's going on, but they still know that she's very temperamental. She's right on the edge, and maybe she's sedated, and they're trying to figure out, what to do. And I don't know who it would be, if it would be Doctor Strange makes a cameo or whatever. This would definitely be, this would be at the end of Doctor Strange into the Multiverse of Madness. It would have to be then. Because if they're going to build her up to be a pseudo villain in that, then the after credits there could be either he or Nick Fury shows up and says, I know a place I can bring her. And then you just see the shot of the mansion and Charles Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters.
Yeah.
Like that, something like that. And you see like his SUV pulling up or something like that. And then you play into the X-Men coming in. And you also get a chance to, depending on how they're doing it with all the other shows, and Kevin Feige's vague, I'm not messing with the X-Men yet. You still give him time to flesh out everything else he's doing, because you don't have to jump right into it. I think that'd be a cool way to end it. Bringing her to the mansion.
Yeah. All right. So one more thing, at least, we have to talk about before we end this. And I'm going to apologize to the sponsors ahead of time, but through a fair portion of the comics, Scarlet Witch's outfit was on a whole nother level than what we get to see in the MCU.
They tried a little bit with one of her leather outfits where some
but it had straps over the shoulders, and there was a cloak cover. No, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if it's physically possible, but I mean, at the
off the shoulder thing,
at the peak of inappropriateness with her costume, I mean, like the breast cup things just like came up to a point right over the, and it just stopped. There wasn't even any straps to hold it up.
It's definitely an interesting corset type of thing.
Yeah,
she had like the gypsy thing going on, and which is funny, to show you how depraved I am. I was like, okay, that's one of the reasons I like her. She's a comic character that looks hot.
Well, and so she has like pretty prominent cleavage in most of the comic drawings too, and so does Elizabeth Olsen. But they don't do that in the MCU really. They don't really show it. They mostly cover it up.
Every comic heroine / super.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, they've all got ample of whatever. The sheer physics of those costumes are impossible to pull off. But like I said, in the MCU, like one or two times you see her, she's flaunting some cleavage, which looks damn good. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely mild on it though, and I bring this up because certainly Wonder Woman has had a whole lot of that in the comics, and they played true to it in the movies. Like they didn't fuck around.
Yeah, they do something in the trailer for this show where she's in what looks like a Halloween costume version. Vision is in a Halloween costume version of his outfit.
Yeah,
true to the comics. So what they're gonna do with that, who the hell knows? I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing them try to pull it off once.
Just once. They've done Vision. They've done Vision in his actual costume in this show. They've done him in his actual costume from like the older comics in this show, like to a T, like the right colors, the right.
Yeah.
But they haven't bothered with her. They've kept her.
Yeah.
They've kept her as sort of the MCU. I'm just gonna wear reddish and black things, and we're good to go.
Yeah.
She's almost like a trench, like a red trench coat at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that may just be their way of going, we can't pull that shit off. She's going to fall out of that thing quick. This is going to be a slave Leia bikini thing going on.
Right.
Although we can hope.
Yeah, they'll probably never do it. But thought it was worth talking about anyway.
It's a whole new set of twins.
The twins and Bobby and Tommy.
Billy and Tommy. Close.
Oh, Billy and Tommy. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Bobby,
Booby. Yeah. I saw where you were going.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's about the note we should end on. I can't get Elizabeth Olsen's cleavage out of my head now.
Yeah.
Not that I could before, but you know. All right. So that was our first
that was our spotlight.
character spotlight.
Closing on the important stuff.
That's right. That's how we do things here. We will bring you the thoughts you never thought you had. So for our first character spotlight, we covered Scarlet Witch. Let us know what you think. Like, subscribe, ring a bell, comment down below. Any key points you think we missed in Scarlet Witch's history, where you think they're going with the show and her character moving forward in the MCU, or in the comics. So, it's been a while since I've been up to date on comics. So, any of you guys out there reading comics, let us know what's going on. Hit us up at whatifgeeks.com, whatifgeeks@gmail.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and anywhere else where you can find us. I'm not sure anymore. There's so many different little fucking things. But we haven't been banned anywhere, so that's good. All right, that's it. Good night, Tony.
Good night, Bobby and Tommy.
Good night, Quicksilver. Maybe forever. We don't know for sure, though.